Since the dawn of time, man has been curious. And for almost as long, the Vibes Broadcast Network has sought the truth. Investigate, discuss, explore. Okay, maybe in other episodes, but this one is just listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I have here Mr. Trent Knox, and we're going to get to know him today, get to know what he does, and maybe get some wisdom from him. So I want you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Trent Knox. I grew up in the Austin, Texas area, and it's ironic that we met on online, and we live like basically down the street from each other.
Right.
And I went initially to Texas State University for my freshman year of college. I went for a mass communications degree to be kind of a public speaker, sort of the ambition somewhat to go to law school and stuff like that. Then I transferred to the University of Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
My parents were living out there. My dad was stationed at Fort Shafter, and I was able to afford to live because my parents were living there. And so I was able to kind of commute back and forth between the University of Hawaii and closer to a place called Red Hill, which is like the sort of a military housing area.
Okay.
And then I went to school there for video production, specifically sort of independent filmmaking and whatnot. And I graduated there in 2015. I had some online courses that I took, but I really walked the stage in 2014. Then I went to work for ABC, a local affiliate in Colorado Springs. And there I learned basically a lot of digital stuff, but also more television, like advertising and whatnot. Let me step back 1 second because I often graze over this, but I also did an internship on the show Hawaii Five-0, which is like a CBS production in season 4. And that was a really good experience, internship and whatnot. Got to be working the wardrobe department there. Also did like some set design and some mostly like PA work on set, running around grabbing batteries and stuff like that. And then I started the job at ABC after that, and then left the job at ABC and moved back to Austin to pursue a career in independent filmmaking, what I kind of went to school for. And in the face of a lot of adversity, learned a lot. And where I'm at today essentially is I'm an entrepreneur that has built a company in the esports and gaming space that is helping business owners enter into the market and find success through a lot of different reasons, a lot of different things, collaboration, media, and networking.
Well, when you make another movie, make me a movie star. Put this beautiful face on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, there's nothing like living around the Austin area. It's so beautiful here, and the people are awesome. It's a little slower than I'm used to. When you live around Houston, if you're in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, you better be going 85. And here, if you're in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, you better be ready to do 45. So,
yeah,
the big difference. But
that's true.
Now you said you're into gaming.
Yeah.
What kind of games do you like to create?
Well, so I'm not a developer, but I guess in a way, I find myself to be going in the directions of eventually being a game developer. But I essentially my platform is an education platform to communicate to parents, educators, industry professionals, what are some of the best ways to be successful in the industry. So, some things will work against you in the industry when it comes to monetizing or creating a product and whatnot for the esports space. If you're in the esports space, which is competitive gaming, you can kind of alienate your audience if you're not talking the same language that they're speaking. And so my platform works to kind of bridge that gap for what we call non-endemic, which is like companies that are not gaming companies, such as razor blades, food and beverage, travel companies, financial services, companies that are outside of the gaming industry, versus the endemic companies, which are more of like the game developers, computer chairs, computer peripherals, mice, keyboards, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're not really a game developing company, but it would be great to get to the point at which we are sort of a virtual world in which you can do the networking component inside there. And we're working with a company called Gamer Jibe. To get there, it's just a process of building the audience first, really, the user base.
Well, I'll be honest with you. You talk about this stuff, I look like an idiot because the first video game that came out when I was a kid, and I'm going to say it was about 10, 11 years old, was Atari.
Right, and yeah.
I can barely play Pac-Man. So all this stuff that goes on nowadays, I don't understand all that stuff. So yeah, it's interesting that you brought a different aspect. I've never had anybody that's even been in the gaming industry on my show before, but it's very interesting. And you're in your profile, you say you're an influencer. Now,
right.
So what exactly does that entail?
Well, in the space of where I'm at, I specifically influence the business side of esports. Mm-hmm. And really what influencer means is there's two components to it. There's the component of having an audience, which is your followers, on social media, who can you broadcast a message to. And the other component is who's your network. So what other industry professionals do you have access to their ear or are able to, communicate a message on behalf of another company to that person. So it could be, sometimes another word for influencer is consultant. Okay. So at least in the business side of it. So when I say influencer, it's generally how people contract me to use the platform, the audience, to distribute a message that they're looking to distribute, versus consulting, where it can mean a different thing. It could mean that I personally am kind of talking out the intricacies of the esports industry, from running a brick and mortar computer cafe to entering into the education space, where a lot of new schools, both high schools and universities, are building out what's called esports labs, where students can go and play video games basically for free. Well, basically it's incorporated into their tuition, alongside a competitive component where there are teams associated to the universities in the same way that you see football or soccer or basketball or baseball. And then on the professional side, where someone is building out a company, also known as an organization, to facilitate the basically running a team of players at the highest level. And that's sort of a negotiation that happens between said teams and team and the leagues, and then with the leagues and then the developer of the game. So there's sort of three different sets of companies working together to try and accomplish a goal.
You must have some brains on you, man. How did you even get into that kind of stuff? I mean, how did you find that was your niche? And what was that something you set out to get into, or is it just something you fell into?
So when I first got back to Austin, I think the first thing I wanted to do was start a podcast about the local music scene. I was really into hip hop, really into indie music at the time, and I was kind of staying connected with the stuff that was going on. And South by Southwest was definitely an influencer in what I was trying to accomplish. And so I set out to kind of pursue that, and I was working different sort of sales jobs at that time. I met up with some folks who also showed interest in starting sort of a media podcast kind of thing. And so we started a company called Austin Live and Local. And that was basically promoting artists, brands, and events in the local area of Austin. And with that, we did fashion, we did music, we did gaming, we did some other things as well, technology, pretty much a lot of the different industries that are kind of prospering in the Austin area. We covered it in some way. That right now is currently on hiatus as I kind of focus on this other brand, Esports Business Network. But that kind of springboarded me towards this direction that I was going in by attending the South by Southwest Gaming convention in 2018, where I was already providing press coverage for all the other industries, and someone just told me basically that there was a huge need for more coverage, more attention, more exposure for the esports space. And at that time, it was before sort of mainstream culture started adopting it in the same way of like, one of the biggest influencers in the gaming space is a guy by the name of Ninja. And he was invited on to Jimmy Kimmel, the Today Show, and Ellen, and all these different shows. And then longer term down the road, he was on The Masked Singer and incorporated into Hollywood in that way. And so he's pretty much the biggest gaming influencer that has been and was previously a competitive Halo player. And so this is a little bit before that when I first got into the industry, and I saw the growth with him having done that. It grew pretty exponentially. And so that's a long story short to answer. Short story long to answer your question. It was inserting myself into these in-person events that really and getting feedback on what do you need to do structurally to be able to build a brand in the space. And so those have been a huge component in the success of Esports Business Network. More challenging so, and we talked about this a little bit before the show in the green room, that the digital component is sort of newer. and a more of a growing establishment with the Esports Business Network than the offline component. The offline component is still growing because I've really only shown my myself. I've only attended events in Texas and California. And so to kind of expand the brand offline, it takes more traveling. So, there are events in Atlanta, there are events in Miami, New York. And so it's sort of, to grow the brand offline, you have to travel. And in the digital space, it grows based off of social media platforms. And sort of our largest right now is LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, I love LinkedIn. I find a lot of my guests on there. It's a great way to network with people, and I like the fact that you've left yourself open for a lot of options. So if something doesn't work, you've got something else to fall back on, which is something a lot of people need to do nowadays. You never know. I mean, look how life has changed since the pandemic started.
Right. Yeah.
How many people are working from home? My wife, for example, that ever since all that went down, she's got an office here in our house, and that's where she works all the time. Now they're talking about maybe doing that for good, get rid of the offices and things. So, it's definitely a whole different world than the way it's been. And I also notice, like, the video games. I see people on YouTube talking about video games all the time. I'm not going to lie. I don't know anything about games. I've never been really good at them, so I haven't had a huge interest in it. But like my grandkids, they're trying to get me to play these games, and I get my little character and it hits the wall, and I just sit there and do this up against the wall. My son-in-law, he's real big into, he gets on there and he plays with people all over the country, and it's just amazing how far things have come since, the 80s. We had Pac-Man, like I said, Centipede, things like that. And I wouldn't even know where to begin. How do y'all keep up with all those buttons and do this and do that, push this up and left, right? I just don't get it.
Yeah. No, that's actually a very, that's a common thing. And it's not just the older generations experiencing that. Even the younger generations are experiencing that, watching some of the youngest talent be the best in all of the games. They grew up in a world, in a reality where it was second nature, whereas in the world that I grew up in, the access to the international global communication hasn't always been there. That's been there for the past 5 to 10 years in its current iteration, right? And so whereas the youth, the Gen Zers, they've been able to talk to their friends in halfway across the world their whole entire life through services like Xbox Live, through newer programs like Discord, where you basically click one button and you're talking to someone on the other side of the world.
It's just crazy. I remember as a child, I had a cousin that he married this lady from England, and I would go over and I'd visit, and then every once in the blue moon they would get on the phone and they would call over there. And of course they didn't spend a whole lot of time because it cost a lot of money. Well, now, I mean, I can get on my phone and talk to my buddy over in the UK through like Facebook Messenger or whatever. You got Zoom, you've got Skype. You could talk to anybody, and it doesn't really cost you anything. So the information gets across the world in a split second.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just amazing. And it blows my mind from, I remember computers being humongous, and then all of a sudden we had them in our homes, and it was still, there was a lot to make these things work, and they didn't work very fast. And now I can do more on my cell phone than what I could do on the computers that we had when I got into junior high and high school.
Absolutely. And I guess the buzz phrase that people have been saying a lot lately is that you can do more on your smartphone than Ronald Reagan could do in the 80s running the free world.
Pretty much.
And well, what's interesting crossed my mind right now is the fact that they're talking about bringing back the Concorde, and the basically 2 to 3 hour flights between most of the major hubs and Europe, right?
Right.
In the U.S., that was decommissioned, I think, in the early 2000s, and they're bringing it back. And we just saw 2 incredible space launches with Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin. Both of them promising, global travel in the next 10 to 20 years via rocket ships. Mm-hmm. and so this sort of technology is developed mostly by gamers, by very sophisticated computer scientists that are constantly looking at what are weighing out what are what's the consequences, what's the best strategy, and so these are some of the same components that are used in competitive gaming, in games such as League of Legends, which is a multi battle arena, now I'm blanking, but it's essentially a 5v5 game, much like Capture the Flag, and then there's,
I know that game.
yeah, exactly. Or a more strategy game, a real-time strategy game, like StarCraft, which is more like chess. And so there's a lot of value. I think a lot of the negative stereotypes that come in with video gaming and gamers in general, that people say, well, gamers are people who sit down and eat Doritos and pizza and Mountain Dew all day and play video games all day. To some capacity, that's true of anybody who's consuming entertainment these days, whether it be movies or television shows or whatever it is that your passive consumption is. But at the competitive level, this is not passive consumption. This is very detail-oriented, strategic planning, with practicing, same as traditional sports, with coaches and franchise owners, and everything is incorporated into these things. But technologically, the only reason why the world advances is because we challenge the way that things are today. There's another way to say that, it's not coming to my mind, but the status quo, challenging the status quo. Okay. Right. And so, like, it's interesting, just to see sort of the emergence of the mobile market that you mentioned earlier, the smartphone being one of the biggest markets for esports internationally. Not so much in the US, because the accessibility to desktop computers, laptops, and consoles it's way more easy to go get them at a Best Buy or a GameStop or whatever have you. But in India and these kind of emerging technological companies or countries, some would call them third world countries. Their access to smartphones is much greater than their access to desktop computers and whatnot, because it's easy to ship a small device. It's hard to ship a heavy device, larger device. So they're becoming way more competitive when it comes to data and information, because the Western world has become accustomed to the luxuries of being able to be sort of able to enjoy comforts like sitting in an office chair or having a sofa. Sort of, whereas in those countries, they're more those luxuries aren't afforded to them.
I know with my generation and my parents' generation, they look at the kids now, they see them playing these games, and they think that's all they do is they just lay around and vegetate. Now, I admit there's a lot of kids out there that's all they want to do.
Right, yeah.
Which I don't have a problem with them getting in there and playing the games for, an hour or two. That I think that it helps with memory, and then you've got the muscle memory. You figure out patterns and things
Absolutely.
like that. So I find it essential because I believe the military uses stuff like that to train a lot of their troops. And so you get into this, like I said, the muscle memory, you figure out what you're going to do, and it sticks in your mind. Like when you ride a bicycle, when you first get on a bike, you don't know exactly how to balance it and all that. But once you get it going and you do it enough, you don't even think about it. You just jump on it and go. Whereas you're worried so much in the beginning. So the people of my generation and the older generation, give these younger kids a break here, because I think that it is essential. It helps with a lot of things. My middle grandson, he's 6 years old, and we think he's autistic, but he gets into those games and stuff, and I mean, it's amazing what a 6-year-old can do. He can get into my cell phone. I don't know how he figures it out, but he knows how to get in my cell phone. So it's building the mind. I don't think they're just vegetating. I think it's really building their minds up.
Well, there's actually a study. I mean, actually, let me not talk about the study, but let me talk about what some of the greatest minds of our times think. Like an Elon Musk, who's building a Neuralink, which is basically going to be a chip embedded in your brain that will allow you to access the same a rudimentary level of data compared to a Alexa or a true computer program, right? You're only going to be able to. Not that Alexa
Alexa's
that's talking right now.
You. How funny.
That's so funny that it's just going back and forth. But so
thanks, Alexa. You can
Alexa,
go sleep
stop. And it's ironic, but you wouldn't want that to happen to your brain, right?
I'm leaving
like
that in the podcast, by the way.
Yeah,
I think that's
I do find that funny as well, because and what's actually funny about that, before all of those devices, the same thing occurred with the Xbox, and they brought basically call to action function by saying Xbox wake up or something like that. And when Twitch, a live stream platform, became super popular, the audience figured out a way to get people who had text to speech on their live streams to have the text to speech tell the Xbox in their room and whatnot to shut off or turn on, or in the middle of their game just completely shut off, right?
Oh my gosh.
And so that's pretty funny, because you wouldn't want that to be the case with something embedded in your brain, But here, long story short, with all that crazy stuff going on, Elon Musk essentially has made a statement that at this point we're basically cyborgs. We all walk around with a small 8-inch device in our pocket, basically attached to our arm. Not really, but basically, that basically it has a full encyclopedia, all the information you'd ever need in this smart device, and so it doesn't surprise me that a 6-year-old with this natively within the reality that we have created is able to operate it far better than you or I could.
True. Well, I mean, you look, when I was a kid and VCRs first came out.
Yeah.
My parents would have hell trying to figure that thing out, how to record on it and all this kind of stuff. Me, I picked it up just like that.
Yeah.
It just seems like it gets incorporated very quickly with whatever generation it comes into. I just
sort of it's sort of instinctually.
Yeah, pretty
right?
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I will say what worries me is that we're relying too much on technology. I notice that I forget how to spell words sometimes, and it's so easy just to get the spell check to do it for me. Whereas, when I was a kid, I could probably win a spelling bee, so I was that good. But now I'm not that good.
Right.
It has its ups, it has its downs. I still say get out in nature and enjoy, especially if you're here in the Austin area. There's plenty of lakes and rivers and hills to just enjoy the nature and have a good time. You've got your pros and your cons. You just have to weigh it out. It's a balance thing, I believe.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned that because we are going in a direction where the let's call it I don't want to sound too technical crazy, but the real world versus the virtual world, or the real world versus the online world, is sort of the language that's used commonly when describing this. That is sort of it's going away in the sense of people are starting to adopt sort of like the Pelotons into their home, or treadmills and whatnot. And you mentioned the military earlier, training. I've been fortunate to see a lot of military applications and whatnot, and been in rooms with sort of leaders in the space with devices like the cradle, which is basically, if you've ever seen a baby's cradle where they walk around in it and they can play with stuff. It's essentially a treadmill on the same thing. And then the military is able to wear like haptic feedback gloves and body armor and everything, and virtual reality goggles. And from there, motions basically tell drones and robots and other secondary robots, sort of like the dogs, and going to Boston Dynamics and their military applications, and it's a different world that we're going to be living in very, very soon. And this sort of technology it has been large conversations at the United Nations about how it should be ethically used in both regular activities in the world, and then war application, of course, with what's the appropriate use. Are there protocols in which you can send in non-biological weapons to imitate biological warfare? And it's, let me just say this much, that the U.S. is definitely at the forefront of this technology. But of course, the Asian market, APAC region, has some very sophisticated technology when in comparison. MIT is developing, Boston Dynamics and whatnot. And you see some incredible pterodactyls, if you've seen sort of the robotic pterodactyls, drones that are able to fly in, convert transformer-like into dogs, or into human application and stuff like that.
Honestly, I didn't even know about that. That's kind of cool. Something that my friends and I will sit around and we'll talk about is just think about my grandparents. Okay, when they were little, I mean, radios were barely in their homes, and then they saw the introduction of TV, And my grandmother, who's 95, now she gets to see you can watch TV on your freaking phone.
Right. Yeah.
Look how far that's jumped in just her lifetime, in the span of 90 years.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going to be when I hit 90? Are we going to be like on Wall-E, where we're all in those floating chairs and weigh 300 pounds?
Yeah. Well, the truth is we exist in that world to a degree already. And, I regularly reference the movie Idiocracy, because we had a celebrity president for the second time. Obviously the first time with Reagan was a different experience, but to be honest, you could consider Washington a celebrity of his time, and in a different right. He wasn't a stage act or anything like that, but the U.S. has always existed in this sort of pseudo celebrity world where everyone has some form of celebrity in some way. And so does the world look as dystopian as a Black Mirror episode on Netflix? Potentially, in some circumstances, you may find that to be the case. But ultimately, I believe with medical application and whatnot of technology, and the implementation of technology into food sources and whatnot will be good. Of course, we have our issues with Monsanto or whatever genetic modification of organisms, GMOs. But to make, okay, like we can just say it this way, is that will some people prefer the virtual reality over their real reality? Of course. I mean, people are living in incredible poverty right now. I can imagine any one of the people who are dealing with schizophrenia, autism, some sort of mental health issue that has put them in condition where they need to live on the street, homeless, like the conditions are in Los Angeles. Of 400,000 people are currently homeless in the Los Angeles region, and 40,000 in the Austin, Texas area. And those numbers pale in comparison. I mean, the Austin numbers pale in comparison to the Dallas and Houston numbers. Austin is obviously a more liberal city, so the numbers on record are higher. But yeah, I think any one of them a number of them would prefer to live in a virtual reality over their current reality.
Well, it's amazing where my conversations go, but it just makes me think of the Matrix. Now, you're going to take the red pill, you're going to take the blue pill. I think a lot of people, they want to take the blue pill. They want to live in the fantasy world. They don't want to know reality. Whereas, do you want to be like Neo and all of a sudden you have to deal with actual reality? I wonder sometimes if we're not living in the Matrix, but that's another conversation for another day.
Well, I mean, I don't mind having that conversation either. That conversation, at least at the higher education, it's sometimes called the Matrix, but it's also called the synchronicity or the sandbox reality, in which the layers of sophistication between like, to put it in layman's terms, like God versus what we as humans have control over, that sense of the religious or biblical terms of free will, right? And so in a scientific standpoint, that's the molecules and the binary code of ones and zeros that we all live in at some capacity, because math ultimately is the language of existence.
That's universal. I mean, even if we ever get to meet someone from another planet, that is one way you can communicate. The numbers are always going to match up. It's language is what separates us, but well, I could get into some deep theological discussions here. The Matrix and
well, here we could pull it to the entertainment side for a little bit, and less serious in a way.
Let's have a little fun with this. I want to hear more about the movie making, because I could probably get you hooked up with some guys that make movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I love growing my network on that end. The Matrix 4 is coming out, and we hope to see it basically embody the conversations that we've been talking about. And there's been I've heard some whispers that there's been some screenings and that they need to go back to the drawing board on a few scenes to kind of tighten it up a little bit more and make it more compelling for a box office audience.
Yeah, I'm gonna make myself sound important, but I got a buddy of mine that's in that movie.
You have a buddy in the Matrix 4?
Yeah, and the Carnage, Venom. Carnage.
Any leaks?
I got a photo, but I can't share it. So and it's with Keanu Reeves too. So
very nice, very nice.
I'm looking forward to this. The guy's a stunt coordinator and martial artist, and I'm really excited. He's got a lot of projects going on, so fingers crossed we get to see this stuff soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've seen some of the leaks from the helicopter scene and Lana Wachowski walking in New York, and I've been trying to keep up with it myself as far as content wise. Like, what can we expect to be delivered? That's sort of, as far I'm going to steal this from another local content creator that I collaborate with a lot, Knives of Monroe. I get jealous when I see, good content being made. And I always envy and want to be somehow incorporated or a part of that production. So to be honest, I don't watch a lot of content because if it's not good, I'm like, well, I should have been a part of it. If I was a part of it, then it would have been different, and that's how I just feel about some of the things. But the Matrix and this new Loki and what else am I looking forward to? As far as like what can the teams bring to the table? I'm actually looking forward to Free Guy too. It's sort of all of these movies kind of surround this.
That's the Ryan Reynolds
this topic.
Movie?
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward to that too. I'll be honest. I got to where I stopped watching TV, and I don't watch very many movies anymore. When something good comes out, I'm there. I want to watch it, and it just seems, especially like when you got Netflix, it's just content that doesn't have the passion.
Right.
It doesn't have the creativity that films used to be. And
right.
I've met some guys that do independent films, and it doesn't have all these spectacular special effects, and maybe the stories are they kind of go slow at times, but it's good stuff. It has you can tell it's got some feeling to it. It's not just something that they crank out because they've already got an IP and they're just using the name, and they've changed everything. It doesn't look anything like what you're used to, and they don't care anymore. That's the way I feel.
In that, I don't even know what you call. I guess it's video on demand. It's Netflix, Hulu, sort of Amazon Prime in a way. They have huge budgets and they can throw a lot of money at productions, and so some of the companies that they work with just produce content that are just produce YouTube level videos, really, and that you would rather have just watched the movie on YouTube, because you wouldn't have had to gone through the hassle of setting up your Amazon this certain way, or your Netflix or Hulu or whatever have you. I think there are some direct to consumer video platforms that have done a pretty good job. Apple TV is sort of one in a way. HBO Max, I've sort of liked the stuff that they're doing. Disney Plus, it's always nice to have access to all the Disney stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if you have young ones around or something like that, always the go-to source for throwing on. Netflix Kids is just like really bad, just garbage. And so, yeah.
Well, you know, I like having Disney Plus because there's a lot of the little kid shows. My youngest grandson likes to watch, you know, Puppy Dog Pals and all that kind of stuff. And maybe I'm just getting old, but I was looking so forward to the Marvel stuff coming out, and I'm just really, really disappointed. It just let me down, and I got to where I don't even want to watch them anymore. I start out, I watch a couple of episodes, and it's like, this is terrible. So I just quit. And I'd rather watch YouTube. I'll be honest with you. I watch YouTube all day while I'm working and doing stuff. I always got YouTube playing, and I find that more interesting, and it seems like they actually care about what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, for the Marvel stuff, it's definitely gotten to a little bit past the edge of too much cartoon-like, sort of appealing to the same demographic that the Netflix-y kind of politically correct and overly politically correct kind of garbage junk, in my opinion. Whereas like you don't get enough, and I was on another podcast, you don't get enough of the gritty realism nature of a DC comics in the same way. You just don't get as much content from them. And when they try to take the directors from the Marvel world and put them into the DC world, it comes off to what people call, or your grandmother and your mom call, superhero movies. You know what I mean? And not like comic book movies or what they would be really in context.
I had a conversation today about how when I was in junior high, it's when heavy metal really came on the scene.
Yeah.
And I was a headbanger. So all through junior high and high school, but as I got towards graduating, you know, there was like a formula that the corporate people wanted the albums to be. Because you had a couple of bands that came out with rock ballads, and it was okay every once in a while, but then it got to be, you have to put one on every album. Everybody that puts out a heavy metal album has to have a ballad on it. And the art of it just kind of dissipated. And then they wanted to include everybody into it, so they made it poppy. And when they did that, you attracted a fan base that didn't really have any investment in it whatsoever, and they might enjoy a couple of songs, but they don't stay for the long haul. And what they've done is they've taken something that we loved, they put it through some kind of a machine, and when it came out the other side, it just wasn't the same, and we pretty much abandoned it. Now, luckily, there was people that still loved the music, but it was never going to be the same. You've got great heavy metal music now, but it's nothing like it was back in the 80s. It's gotten back to that grit. That's what we loved about it. It was gritty. It was against the system, you know. It was something that people would look at you and go, "Oh, you worship the devil," you know. And it was to us, that was cool. And then it got to be lame. It was too mainstream. When it got mainstream, it lost its glory. And thank goodness we've got bands that have come out now that they're trying to get that back, but there's never going to be that same feel that we had all those years ago. I'm an old fart. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you know what? It's something I can relate to in a way. Like I said, when I came back to Austin, I wanted to give Austin a voice, because Austin, as I learned, you know, I didn't know anyone who graduated from my high school that was a musician that was playing music or getting the opportunity to play. I knew some older folks that were able to play some stages and whatnot, but I didn't know anybody I grew up with. So I wanted to know, well, why is it that they're getting, you know, the folks that I did know that weren't getting the opportunity? And come to find out, it was because of corporations. It was because of Live Nation. It was because if there were fees, or like there were fines basically to play any music that is not licensed in the same way that you would from a BMI or an ASCAP or whatever. You need licensing to play music in a venue, right? And so I learned all of this, and I was it was like almost it broke my heart in some ways, you know, to see people who are extremely talented, they can't get on the stage, have to play in the streets basically. And the other thing, you know, that I can relate to that is I got a buddy, my ex-business partner, who is doing an indie show about heavy metal, but more like hardcore, specifically like the hardcore scene. And he and his buddy that he grew up with, it's Brian Kern and Matt Musselwhite. They do a show called I Hate the Scene, and it's on all the like social media and stuff like that. And they talk to some of those indie artists that are on those sometimes tours and whatnot, but are touring acts and stuff like that, that are not signed to those big major labels. Some of them, I think they've probably done one or two major label people, but mostly independent artists. And so they are out there, but at the same point in time, it's very hard for them to find stages to perform on. Austin is one of those cities that there are a lot of stages to perform on if you're an independent artist, but it's still really difficult because the Live Nations, the Big Musics, the C3 Presents, the Walker Music Corp, they pretty much have bought out all of the venue owners so that they only play, you know, their acts.
Well, I like the documentary about the Rainbow there in California, where those bands would come in and they'd get their start, or even the Whiskey A Go-Go, and you know, all these different cool places. Austin's like that. There's a lot of cool places there. You can catch a lot of great acts. And I love the independent guys because you can tell the heart that's in their music. Whereas these corporate people, it has this formula to it, and it loses its artistic, I don't even know how to describe it. It loses everything that is about music.
Yeah, you know, there's something to say about when you're broke, you got a lot of things to cry about. You know what I mean? And then once you have it, like, what is it that you really have to worry about? Like, you know, a lot of folks who start in the music industry they come from, you know, socially economic impacted backgrounds, lower socioeconomic backgrounds. You know, and as a result, their perspective is definitely directed at a certain way. And then once they get the money, the money is one thing, but then the contracts, all the things that, you know, kind of sour a deal, put them in a position where like the music kind of suffers in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, something that's good about nowadays, and I mean, this has its ups and downs too, but you've got these bands and they can go into their home and you can basically do all your recording, the dubbing, everything on your laptop or your computer.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're fortunate enough that they get it on, say, YouTube, and thousands and thousands of people are watching it. They get monetized because their videos are being viewed. And they'll get their name out there. It's the merchandising, it's the touring that really makes their money. Whereas it used to be, you made an album, you sold 1 million copies, you were in high heaven, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just not that easy nowadays. I don't buy CDs anymore because I can just, I've got Spotify on my phone.
Yeah.
And I can hook it up to, you know, my speakers in my living room or the bedroom, and everything I want is right there. And if I can't find it on Spotify, I guarantee you I can find it on YouTube. So I'm any kind of music I want to catch. Now, I still have records and things like that. There's just something magical about opening an album up. I love that feel. And, but you know, that's how you get your music out there. It's through these kind of streaming services and the YouTubes and stuff. So you still can be done, but you still have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's you know, any form of entertainment, the sales funnel is pretty much the same. for everything, marketing and advertising wise. It's, social media is the way to get your name out there. And then, you bring up streaming and whatnot with music. Streaming is something, in the gaming world it's kind of emerging more as we go. There's some reluctance. You'd be surprised with how many people are still like, you got to have the CD, But what's the world doesn't exist in the music. It's not parallel in the way. But what's interesting about what you say about back in the days before, the old days, and not back in our day,
I had an 8-track player.
That's exactly back in those days. Your 8-track broke, your cassette broke, your CD broke. You had to go back out and buy that again. Mm-hmm. So that's what was made a lot of profit in the industry, was that it wasn't good. It's better now that you have access to it at any point in time, but it does take a little money away because nobody's spending $20, break the CD by accident, paying for another $20 at the register. So you're not getting that level of sales. An album, best case scenario, a band gets one album play. It's not $20 they're getting like, 50 cents for an album play or something much, much lower than that. And that's an album stream. So, you have to have the level of fans you need nowadays is pales in comparison to the level of fans that you needed in the old days. Like, I don't think a Metallica would be what they are today in this day and age, or like, look at what Tool did. Like, they had to go the streaming route because nobody was buying CDs anymore.
That's right.
And I'm still surprised that Garth Brooks is still going the route of not streaming his music. It's pretty impressive, that's the thing. Like, I hear about artists that don't do streaming, and I think you've got to have a massive following. And for Garth Brooks, that's the case. Like, I mean, he goes and plays a show, it's sold out 3 days in a row, no big deal. Tool as well.
No lie.
Yeah, Tool as well, right? But they saw the economics just didn't make sense not to do it, right? And so, Tool, Metallica, the big hair bands and stuff like that, that are still around, Aerosmith, what have you.
Yes,
it's just a different game. Yes, right? Yeah.
Well, I go back to that magic of having an album. You go to the record store, you find that record that you want, you get home, you take the plastic off and you open it up, and it smelled wonderful. And sometimes, like with Kiss and the Beatles and Pink Floyd, you'd open up your album and there'd be a poster inside,
right,
or there'd be the lyrics, you'd have those double albums that you'd open up and you'd have this great picture in the middle of either them on stage or, just some glorious picture. And
packaging is great. Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was magical. And I used to dream that one day I was going to be that guy that got to design album covers. I thought that would be around forever. And by the time I got to that point, that part of it suffered as well. You didn't get those great album covers like Molly Hatchet or Nazareth. Those guys, they had just great artwork, and Iron Maiden. Those albums. You don't get that with streaming. It's not personal anymore.
True. There's still that around, but you're developing an image that's about that big. A 1x1 image of a photo that most people will never see the album art. They're just playing the song, which is good in a way because it kind of it highlights more of the musicality that an artist can bring to the table versus the packaging. Because It's like a Coca-Cola has gotten to the point which, it's so mass produced that, the packaging is what you're buying, not the actual magic that's in the bottle. And so in some ways it can be good, some ways it's bad because like you don't get the experience of the packaging. It's a totally different world. And I was like the last of a dying age in that regard. I was born in the early 90s, and so I had the cassettes before the CDs came out, and then after that it was just digital with iTunes and all of that stuff. And there was a brief period in time for the younger audience that there was no such thing as streaming, but there was these ridiculously priced digital downloads where you could still go buy the CD and get the same thing. And at that time, there weren't these digital copyright protection acts, so you could rip the CD and give it to whoever you want. And then in the 2000s, that was sort of taken away, and now you can't share your music at all.
Well, I was that typical teenager back in the 80s. We hung out at the mall, and I used to go to the record store, and I spent more time in there than any place else. Because you could get your punk music, you get your heavy metal, whatever you wanted, it was right there. Then CDs came on the scene, and I was part of that hard-headed group that just wanted to stick with records. I'm like, I don't need the CDs. I'll stick with records.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think my first CD I ever got was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and I listened to it. I was like, wow, this sound is incredible. So then I went to buying CDs. I ain't gonna lie, I got into that, and I was like, well, this is living in. You can't get any better than this. Well,
right.
Shut my mouth. Here comes streaming services, and sure enough, you don't have to worry about the skips or getting scratches on it and being so delicate with it. And it's not hard to scratch a CD.
Right. And it's funny because right before this is just how the world works. I was watching YouTube, and I got advertised to watch a Tony Robbins film of his early days as a salesman, and he was selling cassette tapes at that time, and he had this whole sales pitch, selling someone for them to buy into their cassette subscription, where it was access to all these cassettes. And he was talking about all the reasons why, records melt, crack, chip, and you got to go back and buy a new one. And cassette tapes are the revolutionary, whatever. And it was just like, it coincides so well with this conversation because streaming has resolved that. And I can't imagine the next technology that it is. And maybe that is the Neuralink where, you don't have to touch anything. You just think about the song and it's there. And some of us, with incredibly good memory and that sonic memory are able to already access that, and are able to just hear, in their head, the Beatles or Marvin Gaye or Louis Armstrong play, the best music of our world. But for me, like I have a little bit of it, but not the maximum potential. And I can't imagine the technology that will juice that and just make it so I can just think of a song and it just plays in my head. That would be
incredible.
Future. Yeah.
But
the discovery factor of like songs you never heard of, and you could just think of like, what's a song similar to this with the same sort of, melodies and undertones, and it plays this song that you're like, whoa, this is the next level, Well,
another thing about the streaming services like Spotify,
right.
it will give me suggestions for, music that's like what I've been listening to. And then there'll be a song on there that I haven't thought of in, 20, 30 years. Like, oh, wow, it's great to just go back to that moment and listen to that music again. And it's almost like rediscovering when that happens. And
Right.
I don't know. And it's so awesome when you can just pick up your phone, and I'm in my car and we're driving around, and of course my wife does the driving. I don't drive. I could get on my phone and I could type in whatever I'm thinking of at that moment. And at that instant, I can play whatever I want to play. The wife says, I don't want to hear that. Okay, we'll go with something else. It's so freaking easy.
Yeah.
It's right there. And I love that part of it. But once again, I guess the nostalgic part of me really misses the experience of going to the record store and, you know, seeing your friends or meeting other people that had the same interest. And, you know, and then going to concerts was even more exciting.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, even that's at your fingertips. I can get on YouTube, and any of my bands that I love, I can pull up their video and watch them live. But it's not like being in person, though.
Yeah. You know, and what I was going to ask you is, have you adopted Bluetooth technology yet?
Yes.
And that's another thing that I'm reluctant on. I recently, I had to give it up. I was auxiliary cord all day, but the auxiliary cord, the connection deteriorates, and you know, you just, you know, you got to replace your stereo and to improve your connection and whatnot. And at this point, I think my stereo isn't that great with the Bluetooth connection. So that was one of the reluctance I had. It had Bluetooth, but I didn't really like the connection, how it was all set up. And, you know, I figured out a way to just keep one device in the car to stay connected so that I don't have to constantly be reconnecting the Bluetooth. But that was something that I've been really holding on to, was the auxiliary cable, and it still does sound better if you have a good if you have a good stereo and you can, you know, you plug in a high fidelity like audio player or even your smartphone via auxiliary into your car, and you got a nice set of, you know, you got a nice sound system in your car, it just sounds better. The Bluetooth connection, it's got a different sound.
Oh, and it gets interrupted.
It's not the same. Yeah, there's an interruption too. Yeah.
You know, I get in my wife's car and she has the auxiliary hookup for the phone. So
yeah.
I love that part of it. Now my truck, I had to get some little gadget and stick it in the lighter and
right, yeah,
you know, tune in to my radio station and then play it off of that, and it never sounds good and always cutting in and out. That part sucks. That's why I like riding around in her car. Like I can really
that's crazy. Like my brother's new Honda, it's all built in with AT&T connection, and he just clicks a button and opens up whatever music service, and it's like his phone, his car is an internet. His car's an internet, and it's astonishing. And even like the new Teslas, like the Tesla has speakers, like its horn speaker is a speaker, so you can play the music from the car through the horn.
No way.
Out the car, yeah.
That's nuts.
So technologically, but there's still some definite differences between the analog sound and digital sound. It's just, there's something different about it. You know, and as we kind of emerge, this is something that I'm not the foremost expert or anything like that on audio recording, but I kind of can, you know, I can talk shop a little bit about it in the sense that while visual graphics and things have improved exponentially, audio has not so much improved. We have high fidelity recording, but it's still at 32-bit float. We're not at the 64-bit, 128-bit levels of like of the recording that the visuals are accompanying. So the bandwidth in audio is constricted. And then add on top of that, the frequency of distribution. There are only so many different channels. So we talk about issues with Bluetooth, talk about the issues of radio bandwidth. You know, there's all these different channels, but because of regulations, they've limited the different frequencies that audio can transit on. And so, they've sort of opened that up gradually over time, but that's sort of an international regulation because they think that we're going to microwave ourselves to death with audio.
What was annoying about the CDs is when they first came out, they sounded good. Okay, don't get me wrong, they sounded good, but then they would remaster them and make it sound even better. So now I've got a 8-track of the White Album. I've got a cassette tape of the White Album. I've got it on record. I got the first set of CDs, and I've had to buy it again. And now you can just pull it up on your stinking phone. So I've spent all that money to get this great quality, Beatles music. I know there's something about the sound of records, and I know you got the crackling and stuff that happens with the needle, but there was something just better about listening to the records than it was the tape. The tape seemed like it muffled it a little bit, whereas you got a little bit more crystal clear with the records.
And there's definitely with records, there's more senses being inputted into it. There's a feel, there's a smell, there's a touch, there's a taste in a way, because you remember when the first time you heard it and what you were eating, all these things. Whereas with digital, in the mass produced music of today, most of it's debauchery that you remember in a way. But with high fidelity digital recordings, that's there, but the cost to consume high fidelity audiophile recordings is just astronomical. The average person can't even afford to consume hi-fi. Well, in the streaming sense, so like a Tidal is a streaming service that offers that. It's like $30 per month or something like that to stream hi-fi, but that's like Apple Hi-Fi. Recording hi-fi, you would need a server rack in order to like download the hi-fi file and then be able to process it and play it, because the recording studios, especially the ones in Los Angeles, are so technologically advanced that you need similar technology to really hear it in its purest form. And, just imagine the cost of building a studio like that. Insane.
So you ever go into the Bose store?
I've been in the Bose store. Yeah.
I love going to the demo room and sitting back and listening to the audio. That is incredible. I'm like, oh God, I want to go get my albums and come play them in this room. Hearing Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon in there, or Led Zeppelin. That's been my dream. I got a Bose system, but it's nothing like what you see there. And it's got a good sound to it, so I'm not going to complain. But it's not what I saw in the store. I want that.
What's interesting about that is that people don't think about music in the same way that they do movies. You don't go to an audio theater to hear the newest release of an album, but you'll go to a movie to see the latest release, and you'll go to an IMAX or an iPic or something like that to see like the newest Avengers or something like that, because that their production value, all of that is included in there. But for audio, it's not the same, and maybe that's the reason why people just want to listen to the music, in whatever quality that they can consume it in. Those Bose like environments, test environments are, I'm surprised that I'm not surprised about this, but I'm a little bit, disappointed that that's not something that someone can just go to and plug in their own player and do that. It's on that, in that aspect, it's sort of still indie, because if you want to do something like that and you think about that, you have to go to someone's private recording studio or something like that, and go to like a 7.1 Dolby Atmos environment that's going to have all of the subwoofers, tweeters, all of that stuff involved in there. Or you can buy a Bear Dynamics headphones and, you know, download a Tidal app, but then the smartphone plug sucks. You can buy a little modular tube amplifier that could plug in USB to your computer, and that's essentially the same, very close to recording studio quality. I'm a little bit over enthused by the audio stuff. I love podcasting, and podcasting is so adjacent to the music industry that I learn and pick up stuff on in the music industry recording side that I have some of the same. It's very similar equipment in a way.
Yeah. Well, when I tell people that want to start their own podcast, don't go out and buy all this equipment right off the bat. Just get you a decent camera and a halfway decent microphone. Start out there. As things progress, you get better stuff. I got a much better microphone now than when I first started, and I think it sounds pretty good. My sexy voice and everything. You build up a little bit at a time, and I'm like you. I'm about the sound. I've always been about music. I love music. I love going, especially live stuff. And of course, you go to the Bose store. They also have the rooms. The acoustics are they're built into the room, so you're not getting all that extra, reverb or whatever. You get that real crisp, clear sound, and that's my world. If I could just stay in a room like that, listen to music, and bring me my food, and my bathroom's right there, I don't have to leave, I would stay. That'd be my matrix and never leave.
Right.
We're getting kind of short on time, so talk a little bit about your podcast, and also,
absolutely.
If you don't mind, let us know your social media and if you got a website and all that kind of stuff, so everybody can follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really enjoyed being a guest on your podcast.
Thank you.
Great questions, great conversation. Everything has been really enjoyable and fun. For me, particularly, I definitely, if you're interested in the gaming and esports world, I have conversations with working professionals in the esports industry, trying to develop the monetization and the business practices on a show called Esports Business Network Podcast. You can pretty much find it on any of your podcast platforms, wherever you're listening to this, you can find it. I also have my own personal show, which is called The Trent Knox Show, or just Trent Knox Show, if you look it up. So for the Esports Business Network, you can go to ebn.gg. And then for me, you can go to trentknox.com, and you can pretty much find anything between both that esports show and my personal show on those websites. On social media, just search Esports Business Network. We'll show up there. And for myself, I'm at Trent Knox TV, pretty much on all the platforms. Again, it's been a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you.
And I really do enjoy it, and look forward to listening to more episodes in the future with other guests as well.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know we had to start a little late, but you come on, we have a great conversation. You're interesting to listen to. You've kind of opened up some new world to me, I guess you'd say. I'm learning stuff that I didn't know was going on. That's how, I guess, the old fart that I am. But thank you.
We didn't even jump into conspiracy theories.
Hey, now we could always come back and do that another day. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I thank you. I thank everyone that listens to us. Without your support, we just couldn't do what we're doing. And so, until the next one, take care and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes.
You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network